Hello, Health Science 4502 students. This is Professor Van Dyke with your Week 6 video in regard to your course material and the lecture. So this will cover information that will be on your lab as well for Week 6. And I'm probably going to do two videos. First one will be in regard to your suits, and then the second will be in regard to respirators. So again, you have all week to watch these videos. I also posted a video for your paper, so make sure and send me all your questions that you have in regard to this course material. So we'll go ahead and jump right in with personal protective equipment, which is the fifth lecture for week 6. So again, I like to break these into two separate videos. Just because they seem to work a little bit better. They don't take as long to load and whatnot. So we'll jump right into it. Slide 2. So again, we're talking about suits and respirators. This first video will be focusing on suits. And if you are looking for a good place to find the information on that, if you had the books, you can look at Nolan Hillenbrand on Chapter 8. That's slide 2. That's and again, as I'd mentioned before, I don't test from the book. I test from my PowerPoints. So if you have other questions, you can look at Nolan Hillenbrand, or you can just go to some online sources. Slide 3. So why do we use PPE? And arguably, PPE is absolutely vital. And if you're doing a response, a hazardous materials response, or a cleanup event of any kind, PPE is absolutely vital. Now, again, we use PPE for all kinds of stuff. So when we talk about this being the most important aspect of things like materials cleanups and hazardous material events of some kind, I want you to know that that's really where PPE becomes absolutely vital, because you're going to be far exceeding any exposure limits that you should be having for chemicals and things of that nature. But again, we use suits and respirators on a regular basis for events that are not associated with cleanups and hazardous materials responses. So again, keep that in mind. If I'm working with a specific chemical, I may have a full suit on all the time, or a specific respirator. So that can be very important. And not using the right PPE can absolutely kill you. It can hurt you. It can be very dangerous. So these are the kinds of things that we like to focus on, and make sure that you have a good understanding of the fact that PPE are exceedingly important, and they're very vital in regard to keeping yourself and your workers safe when you're on an occupational setting. And certainly if you're doing a cleanup or a hazardous materials response, then this is absolutely vital for you. So knowing what PPE to use is very important, because for each scenario, you will potentially have a wide variety of options, and you need to understand which ones are the most important. And certainly you want to make sure that you err on the side of precaution to make sure that your workers are healthy and safe. But if I don't have to use a forced air respirator, and I can use just an N95 respirator for specific work, I would certainly want to do that. I wouldn't want to have to take the time, or my staff's time, to put on one of these larger scuba-based respiration systems. So keep that in mind, that understanding and using the right PPE is very important. And as a manager or a worker in EHS, having these skills can be a very employable feature. So do keep that in mind as well. So general types of PPE, we're going to focus on suits and respirators, but there's so much more. There are goggles, ear protection, which we talked about quite a bit. What's the best ear protection to use? And a lot of time we're making that calculation, right? But also boots. Do I need steel-toed boots, or do I need a specific kind of rubber boot that may not be degraded if it has acid poured on it? Things like that. Hard hats are certainly very important for PPE and working in specific areas, but not something that we're going to focus so much for this class. And gloves as well. A lot of you probably remember Dr. Phelan. He did a lot of work on gloves. We use gloves a lot. But how often should we change them, and where are we going to get the breakthrough, and when's a breakthrough going to occur? So if I'm working with a glove, chances are this part of the glove here, where I'm moving my hand very readily, is going to be the place that we're going to have breakthrough. But the question really is, how fast is that going to occur? And if I'm working with a specific chemical, that's always good to know. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of documentation on this, so it really is up to the employee and the employer so that everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do. How often should I change my gloves? And I'll say this with regard to respirators, how often should I change my cartridge? And the answer to that is usually every single day, especially if you've used it. So kind of keep that in mind, that a lot of this stuff isn't going to be necessarily published, but still very important nonetheless. On to slide 5. So we're going to talk about suits, and not this kind of suit. Yeah. So on to slide 6. That's better. That's the suit we're talking about, and certainly they're not very attractive, but when you're working with a hazardous material, they can save your life, and they can be very important. And these are usually going to be Tyvek suits. They're going to work very well. They're going to do a great job. So in the middle, in the blue Tyvek suit, that is Mike Wynn, who had put most of these presentations together. Very fantastic professor. If you ever get a chance to say hi to Mike, make sure and do so. He's a wonderful fellow. But the majority of these individuals, they're wearing the standard Tyvek suit, which is going to protect them from everything except for concentrations of things in the breathing area. So if there is a concentration of a toxic gas, certainly these Tyvek suits are not going to protect you at all. On to slide 7. So why would we wear a chemical protective suit? So this is going to help protect your skin and your eyes when you have a full face respirator or goggles on from an exposure to a chemical. So that's really what you're trying to do. You want to protect yourself and minimize that exposure risk when working with specific chemicals. And that suit's going to help you out quite a bit. And generally, you're going to need it, at least goggles. The question is it off-gassing? And if your chemical requires that you utilize a respirator, you most certainly want to do so to avoid damage to your lungs. If you don't know what the substance is, you have to wear a suit. If you're not sure what you're dealing with, you always err on the side of caution and go for maximum protection from something that you don't understand. If you don't know what it is, assume that it is the very worst, that there's going to be immediate danger to life and health, and these are the kinds of things that you want to focus on, and that's what these personal protective equipment will protect you from, and certainly the suits. So on to slide 8. How do you know what suit to pick? That's the hard part. And like I said before, when you don't know what you're dealing with, you go with the maximum protection. You go with the most reliable, most guaranteed protection from exposure to your lungs, exposure to your eyes, exposure to your body. So with regard to picking suits, a suit's not going to be selected without thinking of the proper ensemble. And when we say ensemble, I'm not talking about the right tie and whatnot. I'm talking about the right gloves. I'm talking about the right boots. Should I have steel-toed boots on? Should I have, is it okay to wear nitrile gloves, or do I need something that's stronger? And these are important components in regard to when we talk about the ensemble. So the ensemble essentially is your outfit. All parts of the ensemble have to work together, right? And certainly with a protective suit, this is what you're going to be focusing on. You don't want to wear a suit and then just have regular tennis shoes on, because it gets on the suit, it runs down to your shoes, it goes right through your Nikes or your Adidas or whatever else you're wearing, and it burns your feet. And you definitely do not want that. So make sure that you have the right ensemble. You should pick the right ensemble based on the potential hazards that you're going to encounter. So it's a good idea to have an understanding of what it is that you're going into. Is there chlorine gas, for instance? And what respirator should I use if that's the case? And certainly you want to pick your ensemble based on all these different pieces. So on to slide 9. There are 4 types of ensembles, level D through A, so D, C, B, A. These are the levels for the ensembles, and we'll go ahead and talk about kind of each one of these now. So on to slide 10. Level D is the lowest level. It provides the least amount of protection. So when we talk about level D, it's like, okay, this is the very basics, where level A is going to give you the greatest level of protection. So every level builds upon the level below it. So level D is going to be very minimal, and level C is going to be slightly increased. Level B is going to be increased above that, and then level A is going to have the maximum protection for an individual. So again, we'll kind of talk about each one of these. Let's move on to slide 11. Slide 11 is the level D ensemble. Now, with regard to your lab, if you've read it already, you see that basically what you're going to do is you're going to take some of these ensembles and kind of pick them apart and discuss when they would be most readily usable. So that's what I want you to focus on for your lab. So with the level D ensemble, that's usually going to include boots and shoes that are made from leather, and steel-toed shoes, safety glasses or goggles, a hard hat, work gloves, coveralls, and disposable outer boots like booties. So level D, again, this equipment can also be worn when the atmosphere contains no known hazard, and it's, you're just kind of worried about some splashes, inhalation, or contact with hazardous substances, hazardous materials. So level D is really kind of a prophylactic. And again, you may not need a hard hat, but certainly with level D ensemble, we look at a hard hat as being an important thing that you would want to wear, because you may encounter issues while you're working in and around a hazardous environment. So, maybe I'm pouring chlorine into a swimming pool, and this would be the kind of thing that I would look at and say, okay, I should at least have a level D ensemble to pour chlorine into a swimming pool. Things like that. On to level C. Level C includes all of level D, but it's also going to have either a full face or half face respirator, which is NIOSH approved, and this can be like the N95. So you've actually seen some people wearing these out and about when they go out with the coronavirus protection. So that's going to be that half face respirator that's going to cover just the half face. But you also have full face respirators as well. So level C can be half faced or full faced depending on the hazard that you're working with. Gloves, which are outer and inner gloves. Boots, outer chemical resistant boots. Now, as you remember with level C, you're building. So level D had leather boots. Sometimes leather is not great, and certainly acids can eat right through a leather boot. So level C is going to step it up a little bit. And then we're also going to have a hooded 1 or 2 piece chemical splash suit or disposable suit like Tyvek or Seranex. So these are those important pieces. You can see how we're slowly building to a higher level. So level C equipment should be used when there is a likelihood of skin contact. So it's probably going to happen with liquids. The air contaminant has been identified, and you have a good understanding of the quantities, and all requirements for the use of APRs are being met. So again, protective chemical resistant suits. You want to make sure that you're very well protected from any potential threats that you're facing, and that's why you're going to move up to this level C ensemble. So let's go to level D on slide 13. Slide 13 talks about level B ensembles. Level B ensembles are going to be the exact same as level C, but you're going to have supplied air respirators. So these are really important. So you'll see a slide on SARs that's coming up in the next video. So you'll get a better idea of exactly what a supplied air respirator is, and that's going to give you some information in regard to when it should be used. So that level B ensemble is essentially exactly the same as level C, but it builds one step further in that you're going to have supplied air respiration. Now, the important thing to remember with this is with the SAR, you're going to be breathing air that is not in the environment. So you can imagine how this can be very handy. If you need to have a supplied air respirator, that means the air around you is hazardous. And a half face shield, full face respirator, or half face respirator is not going to do the trick. So keep that in mind. That's the level B ensemble. Level B protection should be used when, slide 14, sorry. Level B protection should be used when the type of airborne contaminants and the concentrations thereof require a high level of respiratory protection, but not so much for skin protection. So I don't want to breathe it in, but it's okay if I kind of get exposed to maybe a little bit of this material in regard to a concentration in the air. But again, I really want to make sure that I'm not breathing this material in. So this would be a good time when you're working with things like maybe potentially with asbestos, possibly, that might be a good time to use a level B ensemble. So oxygen concentration in the atmosphere is less than 19.5%, so this is an O2 deficient environment. So a good place to use this may be in a closed cistern. Maybe if you're going into a confined space that you need to have air that is going to be provided to you through the SAR, supplied air respirator, but you're really not too concerned about anything exposing your skin. So this level B ensemble really works well when you go into a confined space that you know essentially is not going to have chemicals so much, but maybe oxygen deficient. So the vapors and gases have been identified by a direct reading instrument. So you know you're not going down into a scenario where there are vapors and gases that may be dangerous, and you can have even skin contact can be dangerous for this. So vapors and gases are not sufficient to be a challenge for you, and they can't be absorbed through the skin. So this is going to be the time that you're going to want to use this level B ensemble. So really a great example of that is going into a confined space. Now I'm kind of giving you some pretty steady clues in regard to what you should be writing about with your lab. But again, keep in mind, with your labs are worth about 5 points. It's not a huge amount of points, and it can cost you in the long run, but I would much rather you focus on doing well in writing your papers, your presentations, and certainly your tests. I really want to see you put some effort into the writing for your tests. I've noticed over the years that I've taught this course that I have some students that write amazing labs, and then they get to their midterm and they don't do well in writing their midterm. The midterm's worth so many more points, so keep that in mind. Do well on your labs. Invest in the knowledge, and do well in your writing always. You want to be a great writer to communicate, and this will assist you in any future endeavors in regard to your careers. So let's move on to slide 15, which is the level A ensemble. The level A ensemble is going to include self-contained breathing apparatus. So this is what we call essentially scuba. This is where the word scuba comes from. And this is going to be fully encapsulating chemical resistant suit. So you saw the blue suit earlier. I guess that was Jonathan. I don't even know who that is. So yeah, the blue suit. That's going to be fully encapsulating, and it's going to have the scuba self-contained breathing apparatus. You're also going to want to have inner gloves. The suit already has gloves that are built in, but you're going to want some inner gloves to protect you as well. And then boots. Boots can be worn on the inside of the suit, but more commonly on the outside. And depending on the suit, you're going to have some pretty heavy duty boots, and these boots are going to be chemical resistant boots. That's very, very important that these are chemical resistant. You don't want to be walking around with leather boots and all of a sudden you start to see them smoking as they are burning up from an acid or a base. So boots can be worn on the inside, but more common they're on the outside. A hard hat under the suit, which is optional, as I'd mentioned before. You want to know what you're going into, and a lot of the time you don't need a hard hat if you're going into a cleanup or a spill or something of that nature. So disposable suits like Tyvek are worn under this level suit. So again, you're going to have that double layer of protection. But again, you really, with a level A ensemble, this is the maximum protection. And with the self-contained breathing apparatus, it allows you to go into any scenario knowing that you're going to be protected from these chemical related issues or possibly even physical hazards, things like that. So you really want to make sure that you're well protected. With a level A ensemble, you want to be fully encased in the suit and the scuba, so you're not going to be going into an environment that is just like the confined space. Oh, I don't have to worry about it because it's just an O2 deficiency. No, this is actually, you're going in because you might have chlorine gas or things like that where you have to be protected from head to toe, including your respiration process. So level A ensembles, very, very important. So you should wear a level A ensemble. This is slide 16. You should wear a level A ensemble when the type of contaminant and the concentration is unknown. If you don't know what you're going into, you're going to want a level A ensemble. And the IDLH, the immediate danger to life and health, can exist or is suspected to exist. So if you think possibly that there is an IDLH, you want to make sure that you have a level A ensemble and that you're very well protected. Protect yourself 100% of the time. So if you don't know what's going on, you want to go with a level A ensemble. Even if it's just, oh, you know what, this doesn't look right, but I'm not sure, maybe something's going to splash on me. Oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm going into. That's when you're going to go level A. So if you're thinking, you know, I may get some splash from a little bit of chlorine that I'm pouring, you can use level D. But if you're going into an environment that you don't know what's going on, like maybe there's a confined space that you're not sure what's going on and you can't take an appropriate reading of what's going on in the confined space, that's when you're going to use this level A ensemble to keep yourself protected. On to slide 17. Starting from level D to level A, every level builds on itself. So these are things that I want you to remember, okay? So just like the boots, so safety eyewear, hard hats, they should be really present. They're present at every level essentially, except for level D. And again, the hard hat is optional, so keep that in mind. You know, these have some adjustable components to them. If I'm working in level D, maybe I want a full face respirator because I'm really not familiar. And so with that case, you know, I would make some adjustments to each of these levels so they're not hard pressed set in stone, other than the fact that A is going to have that scuba and D you're going to have, you know, an apron and some basic components to protect yourself. So keep that in mind. So if you're wearing a full face respirator, an APR or SAR, you don't need goggles or safety glasses because the eye protection is already built in. So if you have a full face respirator, keep that in mind that you probably are not going to specifically need to have these eye protection like goggles because they're already built in. Now that being said, if you have prescription glasses that you utilize while you're working, you're probably going to want those. So keep that in mind while you're working and make sure that you're aware of that. Make sure that you're protected, but make sure that you protect yourself at all costs. That's really the best advice I can give you in regard to protection with PPEs. If you have any doubt in your mind, go higher, okay? If you're putting gloves on and you're like, you know, I'm not sure nitrile is the way to go with this, then go to latex gloves. Don't mess around with this stuff, okay? And that's my word of advice to you, is that you make sure and you use the most effective means possible. And if you don't have an understanding of what you're going into, go with level A, okay? So on to slide 18. So this is in regard to breakthrough time, and we put this on here because Dr. Phelan had done such a wonderful job of teaching and talking about breakthrough times that I miss him dearly. I wish he was still here because he did a lot of studies on these things. So suits and gloves, manufacturers issue chemical breakthrough permeation time specific for the type of suit and the chemical being handled. But again, from our testing at Cal State San Bernardino, we found that breakthrough time occurred a lot more quickly if you were utilizing these gloves or suits in a robust fashion. So should I change it more frequently? Probably. You know, look at the manufacturer's guidelines on breakthrough times, but adjust accordingly. So you should try to limit your exposure to the chemical based on the published time. This is slide 18, by the way. And if the breakthrough time is not sufficient for your needs, you may need to upgrade to something that has a longer breakthrough time. But again, don't mess around. If you're working with nitrile gloves, change them very frequently. There's a reason they're cheap and they come in boxes of usually like 250. So keep that in mind, that with breakthrough time, you're working with PPE that may sustain damage during your use. And be aware of that and make sure that you're very well protected in regard to breakthrough time. So again, when you're working with any kind of glove or suit, you want to know what the breakthrough time is and make sure and change your suit accordingly. On to slide 19. Why is this important? Because you have to anticipate what could happen to a suit or to your gloves so you know what to look for. So, oh my gosh, you know, I have a breakthrough time on this suit. I've been wearing it for 20 minutes. And the breakthrough time for the materials I'm working with is 20 minutes. you need to get that suit off. But let's say, for instance, you're 15 minutes in and you go, something's not right here. Why do I feel, I feel like there may be something going on. Err on the side of caution and change out that suit. Look for these things so that you know what to be looking for. It's important to examine your suit and determine its suitability before wearing it. Is it suitable for you? You want to know whether or not it's going to be good fitting. You want to know what the breakthrough times are before you get started on these things. So make sure that you're well aware of that. And you want to store them in an appropriate fashion. Make sure and take care of your suits and your respirators and things like that. And decontaminate if they need to be decontaminated. If you're using them repeatedly, that can help your suit last a lot longer. So make sure and do that. Take care of your suit. If you have a respirator that you have to use on a regular basis, make sure it's protected. Don't just throw it in the cab of your truck and then it ends up on the floor of the truck, and it's not good. So know when you're supposed to change these things. Know how to clean them. Know how to make sure that you are well protected in regard to breakthrough time. And these are the important pieces in regard to wearing a suit. So slide 20, I hope you all enjoy slide 20. And obviously, I want to be Ned Flanders here, right? So make sure you're wearing the right materials. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. So this is a video in regard to wearing suits. And now I'm going to go ahead and start the next video, which is going to be in regard